You.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. We've had a few developments over the last couple of days, and I just felt that maybe it is time for us to re-look at our fundamental right of speech and expression one more time. Like, for example, we already have people on our chat windows saying that both Kangana and Vir Das are wrong on their stand. So it's interesting because we could disagree with them about the fact that they're wrong. We don't like what they're saying. But do both of them, as citizens of this country, have a fundamental right to express their opinion? And is it fair then for these various people to go out and file FIRs against them? Now, let me just break this down for you. Vir Das has put out a piece that he read out after his show was over at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. He was performing. It's gone viral. He talks about the two different kinds of dichotomies of two different kinds of Indias. And people have said that, and I quote, used derogatory language in his Two India monologue at that live event. Advocate Ashutosh Dubey, who's the legal advisor of the BJP, who in Maharashtra lodged one complaint with the Mumbai police. Another complaint has been filed by one Aditya Jha, spokesperson of the BJP in Delhi. He has said that he will not tolerate anyone insulting our nation in another country. He seems to be more concerned with the geography of the insult. He said, I will take this fight to a decisive end. I want Vir Das to be arrested so that no one can malign the nation like this. Kangana Ranaut, on the other hand, made statements at a news channel event where she basically attempted to rewrite history. She said that our freedom movement was actually just begging from the British. She questioned all of it, including Mahatma Gandhi, Nehru, and the process that entire freedom movement actually went through. I mean, one could ask, first of all, how Kangana Ranaut is in any way qualified to comment on history or democracy or our personal freedoms or our constitution and why her opinion is of value. But the question that we actually have to ask is freedom of speech and expression. Are both of these individuals given that freedom? And then is it fair for these FIRs to be registered against her? Now, Kangana Ranaut has got the Maharashtra Congress saying that they are going to file an FIR against her. At the same time, the Nainital home of Congress leader Salman Khurshid was vandalized and set on fire on Monday because he released a book called Sunrise Over Ayodhya, where he apparently compared Hindutva to radical Islamist groups. The other thing that we should also bring about in this conversation is the latest film Suryavanshi that has come out, where journalist Rana Ayub and several others have accused the film of being furiously Islamophobic. And that is a problem as well. So we're going to try and find out where our freedom of speech lies in all of this. Joining me this evening is Ms. Karuna Nundy and Mr. Sanjay Hegde. Good evening to both of you. Thank you for joining us. For our audience, remember Article 19 of our Constitution gives all citizens freedom of speech and expression with some conditions. Those conditions are in the interest of sovereignty and integrity of India, security of the state, friendly relations with foreign states, public order, decency, morality, contempt of court, defamation, and incitement of offense. If I may please start with Mr. Hegde. Mr. Hegde, good evening. Thank you for joining us. Does Article 19 give both Vir Das and Kangana Ranaut the freedom of speech and expression? Has what either of them said broken any of these exceptions that our Constitution has listed out?
See, there's a structural problem in how we think that there are reasonable restrictions. What Clause 2 of 19 actually says is that what is provided in Clause 1 shall not affect the operation of any existing law or prevent the state from making any law insofar as such law imposes reasonable restrictions on the right for these reasons. Now, we tend to emphasize on the exception so that there's no freedom of speech left. In the great words of Idi Amin, freedom of speech I can promise you, freedom after speech I can't promise you. That seems to be the way it is interpreted these days. Nothing that Kangana has said or Vir Das has said in any way falls afoul of any of these laws. The point is that we live in two Indias, in an India that learns its history from Kangana Ranaut and outrages against Vir Das. But I sometimes appears to me that we ought to live in only one India, where there is one nation, one God, one leader. That may be the India that is desired by many people. This idea of two Indias seems absolutely heretical. Yes, I am trying to be a stand-up comedian on your show, but nobody is laughing. I don't think people dare laugh.
So effectively, what you're saying, Mr. Hegde, is that there is a double standard being applied to both of these people. One could argue the other side as well. I mean, Kangana Ranaut is being hounded by the Congress party in Maharashtra, saying that they'll file cases against her. To be fair, has she broken any laws? Is it against the law in our country to not have read a book?
No, it is not. I mean, reading a book is positively harmful. How can you read a book? These days, you are not supposed to go beyond WhatsApp. And if you say something which can go viral on WhatsApp, then you are a big person. So yes, Kangana Ranaut has all the rights to say what she wants. Vir Das also has the same rights. And I don't think that we, on both sides, should be outraged. If you don't like a speech, shut it off. Who's asked you to download everything and then watch it so that you can be outraged? There is a whole industry of what I call outrage porn, which is going on. People want the right to outrage so that they can appear to be more virtuous. It just doesn't work like that.
Yes.
If you want a sane country, let people speak. The answer to a speech is another speech. If you don't like a speech, draw away, or come out with a counter, laugh it off.
I just want to bring in Ms. Nundy. Ms. Nundy, good evening. Thank you for joining us. This idea of insulting India while overseas seems to be what a lot of the people filing FIRs against Vir Das are talking about. I will not allow him to defame India like this overseas. Is there a law at all in our country that specifies what you can and cannot say? And, is there a law that prevents you from, let's say, point blank, criticizing the country while overseas?
No, of course there isn't. And Mr. Souza, I think that we're all in agreement that none of this is against the law and all of this is part of free speech. However, I think that to some extent we are asking the wrong question, because I think that there's a fundamental distinction between Vir Das's speech and a lot of speech, a lot of other speech that is propagated in the name of free speech, right? And to some extent, this is also true of Kangana Ranaut's speech. The Constitution of India has Article 19(1)(a) and guarantees free speech, that is correct. But it also includes within its ambit Article 14 on equality before law and Article 21 on the right to dignity. And I think dignity is something that is important. There is now increasing thought on looking at structural equality in the context of speech all over the world, including, and a leader in this is the Constitutional Court of South Africa. So the Constitutional Court of South Africa, for example, found that the Equality Act that they had was overbroad, in that it shouldn't have said that they will make illegal speech that is hurtful, right? And like in our Shreya Singhal case, for example, where our court said that you can't criminalize speech that is annoying or inconvenient. However, the Equality Act does say that you cannot against protected groups. who have been historically discriminated against perpetuate harm. And that harm doesn't lead to disproportionate criminal penalties necessarily, right? And that harm has to be demonstrated and it has to be proven. I think this is a very important point, and has to be decided by a court. And I think that's where a lot of these cases will fall. But I think that this is important, because if you look at speech that is, say, speech that is propagating Hindu supremacy, right? Does it at some point, and I think that, you know, the state needs to be looking at empirical data to see whether that sort of speech leads to discrimination in employment. Does it lead to discrimination? And in particular cases, but also in general, right? We need studies on this. Does it lead to discrimination? You know, all this screaming on TV channels, you know? Does it lead to people being denied housing? Does it in fact lead to people being lynched? And I'd be very interested in this, you know? And also in particular cases, is such harm caused? Versus somebody like Vir Das saying that, look, I love lots of things about my country. I could move, I'm not moving, I live there, right? Here's the bits I love, here's the bits that I have serious problems with. And I think that actually is the definition of patriotism, right? Saying that these are the things I love, and yet I critique it, because if you don't recognize the problems, if you don't recognize that there are crimes against women, if you don't recognize that there is the suppression of speech, and that women with laptops are making it work and are upholding it and being arrested for it and are being accused under the UAPA for it and are being shut out of their jobs for it, right? Then how are you going to actually expand those platforms? How, if you don't even recognize the problem? The fact that you're speaking abroad, surely we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and we're all interested in free speech. Surely we're all interested in not having crimes against women. And when the VHP has masses of funding from the United States into India, and there is Hindutva speech propagated on campuses in the United States and in other parts of the country, right? Is that arguably unconstitutional? But does anyone say that you can't say it, right? Because it's illegal and because it's criminal? No.
I just want to ask one question of Mr. Hegde. Mr. Hegde, there's one argument that has come in on Twitter where a lot of people have said, Vir Das says, you know, I come from an India where we worship women as goddesses during the day, and I'm paraphrasing here, and gang rape them at night, end quote. And the argument is that it's only the Sanatan Dharma or the Hindu Dharma that worships women as goddesses. The other, couple of religions don't. So what he's doing effectively is singling out one particular community and accusing them of gang rape. Now, this is the accusation that I've read in many comments on Twitter. Is that a valid accusation in your mind?
Listen, you don't like what he says, you say something better. That's about it. Do we worship goddesses in India? Yes, we do. Do rapes of women happen at night? Yes, they do. Can you not say both things in the same sentence? Yes, you can. What is the problem? The problem seems to be that, according to those who complain, that he ought to have said that. The only answer I can think of is from Rahat Indori. हमारे मुंह में तुम्हारी जबान थोड़ी है. सभी के खून है यहाँ की मिट्टी में शामिल, किसी के बाप का हिंदुस्तान थोड़ी है. So it's like that. Hindustan, India contains 1.3 billion voices. One voice may say one part of some story. Somebody else can say some other part. It can't be that whoever speaks has necessarily to speak only one approved version of events. That's not freedom to speak. That's not freedom of speech. That is freedom to speak only that which is pre-approved. That's not how things work. So
Could you say-
if you think that there is an innuendo, that you have to, then you would have to prove that this was an innuendo deliberately designed to inflame communal passion against one set of people. Now, you do it in India, and you do it in a way like, on the campaign trail, people have spoken of Mia Musharraf. Now, was there an innuendo there? Was that actionable? Doubtful, but maybe. But if you do it abroad, just 1 minute, there's a very specific question in my mind as to how does the Indian criminal law stretch overseas? There are jurisdictional issues. So if India were to make a law that you will not speak about India abroad, who would enforce that law? And it would be void for extraterritoriality. So all these concepts that you dare not blackmail us outside the country, it doesn't have any legal legs to stand on. Maybe emotional, that's a different thing.
So, that was going to be my next question, because then if it doesn't have legal, as both of my guests seem to agree, why are the police taking down?
No, I don't agree.
You don't agree? Okay, please, Nundy, go ahead.
The thing is that the internet takes away the territoriality argument, because this is an argument that was attempted to be made in the Subramaniam Swamy case, right? In the context of criminal defamation. To say that if you have, for example, because if you have something on the internet, then very often, and I have defended many cases like this, and it's a real problem, FIRs are filed, say, across the country, right? So this is something that was in an attempt to limit the ambit of the offense. That argument was made. When something is on the internet, then the territoriality argument of where it was originally made goes, because then the speech is deemed to be under the operation of the law and the effects that it may have under the provision of under the requirements of that law, wherever it is made. Is this ideal? Of course not. But it gives rise to then therefore FIRs all over, and it is the registration of the FIRs, and this is where the state gets involved, right? You can have lots of misguided people making complaints, and lots of people attempting to bully people who are saying things that they disagree with, that make their political party and their leaders look bad, as opposed to the country. Now, these are two very different things, right? Because I think what's happening here is that Mr. Das spoke of indirectly, possibly, I think, in my opinion, this may not serve him, of Mr. Modi. Now, that is, of course, the main trigger, I think, of all of this. So now you may have a bunch of misguided people incorrectly filing complaints. I think the problem comes when the FIR is registered.
Yes.
And I do think that is very important, because in all of these cases, it is well known, it is the process that is the punishment. I think it's very important for courts to provide damages in these cases, and to the person who was wrongly prosecuted, particularly to the person who was wrongly incarcerated. And where the act was particularly egregious, I think disciplinary inquiries, and where there have been criminal offenses by our law enforcement itself, I think that criminal actions must be taken. Of course, a state sanction will be like waiting for Godot, but that can be questioned in court.
So that was going to be my next question. So let me take the question now to Mr. Hegde. Mr. Hegde, when are the police allowed to apply their minds when filing the FIR, or in a matter of free speech, like the ones we're talking about with Ms. Ranaut or Mr. Vir Das? Is it the court finally that will decide? And do we then have a system where process is punishment? Should the police be more circumspect? Because They're talking about sedition. They're talking about national integrity. They're talking about fairly serious cases that are being registered against these individuals.
Well, the police actually don't have discretion. After the Supreme Court judgment in Lalita Kumari, the law is that if the FIR discloses a cognizable offense, the police have no option but to register it. After they register it, what they do with it is their business. Now, so therefore, there should not be a process where after the filing of an FIR, there is an automatic arrest. This is where the real problem is. You may have FIRs. You may have the police investigating. You may cooperate in the investigation as long as your freedom is secured. However, what happens is the police use the fact of a FIR being filed as an immediate provocation to arrest. That is what, there is another judgment there, which is the Vir Das judgment, which says that normally you give a notice and ask them to join investigation, and only thereafter you make a determination as to whether an arrest is necessary. See, what actually happens on the ground is this, that any policeman, any thanedar, basically is concerned with law, with order in his jurisdiction. He finds it safest to catch the so-called offender whom the mob wants, put him or her in prison, and tell the mob, look, I have taken action. Now the matter can shift to the courts. You please disperse. Correct. So this is what I call thanedar justice, rough and readily administered in the interests of keeping order in a particular place. This is what now needs to be tackled. Courts, yes, I'm sorry, you had a question, Faye?
Yes, when the mob is online, Mr. Hegde, as it is right now, is that now, is this a furthering of this thanedar justice that we're seeing right now?
When the mob gets online, then, and nowadays you have a lot of cyber cells which are in the police, which are often headed by people who were thanedars before. And they operate on the same old system. So what has happened is that this online social media aggregation makes it much easier for offended people to come together and make a great deal of clamor. It takes great, what shall we say, belief in the rule of law for a policeman to say, yes, I will register your FIR. I will do my investigation, and only if necessary will I arrest. And if I don't find a case, I will not file a charge sheet. A policeman who likes order will say, yes, so-and-so has complained, so-and-so has directed me to do something. Arresting the man is doing something. The mob is satisfied. The person who's given me the order is satisfied. Thereafter, whatever happens in court, let it happen in court. This is where the problem lies. And unless courts now make it tough on policemen to who simply end up filing charge sheets where no charge sheets are necessary, it would perpetuate itself. The police effectively become enforcers for mob rule.
Yes.
You have the outrage of the mob, which is then backed by the police wing of the state.
In fact, that was going to be my next question. I'll take this question to Ms. Nundy. On Twitter, there are calls for Mr. Vir Das's arrest as soon as he touches down in India, whenever that is. And they've said, feeling that they will meet him at the airport and personally take matters into their own hands. This is what Twitter largely looks like right now. Does this qualify as a law and order situation as far as the police is concerned? And can the police then make that arrest in order to avoid that law and order situation, like Mr. Hegde said, the thanedar form of justice?
See, you actually specifically can't do that because in the case of Ambikesh Mahapatra, where whose case we brought to the Supreme Court at one point. What had happened is that he had, and it's nice that it's not a BJP or a Congress state. This is, well, I don't know if it's nice, but it's less controversial in some ways. This was in Kolkata. So this man puts out a cartoon based on Shonar Killa, which is a Satyajit Ray children's story, okay, mocking the chief minister, who was still Mamata Banerjee at that point. He sends it to his housing society. A third party who did not receive this message goes and complains against him under this section 66A, but also section 509, which is outraging the modesty of a woman, which is completely ludicrous, because if you see the cartoon, you'll realize it's not particularly funny, but it is not criminal in any way. And in particular, in these ways. So what happened was that he was detained, right? This also happened in the case of Reenu Srinivasan and the two girls in Palghar who were detained when they said that, or when Reenu Srinivasan only posted a like, but the other young woman said that after Bal Thackeray passed away, that Mumbai shuts down out of fear and not out of respect. And they were detained initially because the Shiv Sainiks were all there in front of and mobbing it. So the police does this sometimes. You cannot do that. It's illegal. Detention is arrest. The West Bengal Human Rights Commission, in fact, passed an order in the Ambikesh Mahapatra case. He's a professor of chemistry in Jadavpur University, saying that you can't do that. You can't detain the man because any detention in that manner is arrest. Now, the thing is that I don't think that the police should be let off the hook for registering FIRs in any and every case, right? So, for example, if somebody says that India is a poor and dirty country, right? I may think that I don't really like the way that this is being said, you know? And why, say a foreigner comes and says this in this country, and I say, what is this? Don't say that, I don't like it. Somebody goes and registers an FIR. It's not sedition, right? So the point is that what Lalita Kumari says is that when a cognizable offense is disclosed. Now, there are 2 points here. One is the offense cognizable, right? And some of these offenses are not cognizable. So you don't have to register the FIR, right? You can have a preliminary inquiry. The second is do the facts disclose the cognizable offense, right? So therefore, you have, unfortunately, your local constable, the person on duty, having to boil down the various Supreme Court judgments which are not in his copy of the IPC frequently, right? And for example, the Rangarajan judgment, saying that it must be a spark in a powder keg, other such salutary judgments, you know? So his IPC doesn't say that. What he has is his bare sections, and has to interpret those bare sections to see if an offense is disclosed. Now, here we have a structural problem in terms of our police capacity. And I think that's one question that should not be ignored, you know, because in some of these cases, you have the mob showing up and there aren't enough police personnel. So let's be clear about that. That happens as well. But I absolutely think that when there is a complaint in a speech offense in particular, you should have an officer of a particular rank looking at it to see, does it disclose an offense or not, even on the face of it, even if it is cognizable. Does it disclose a cognizable offense, you know?
So in this case, Mr. Hegde, what would you know, if you were to explain to our audience who are still asking this question, is what would be an offense? What would be a speech offense? You know, if we argue that what Vir Das said is just his opinion of what he loves and what he doesn't so much like in India, it was his criticism, which we understand as a citizen he is allowed to do. What would constitute an offense?
What would constitute an offense? Now, let's put it this way. If Vir Das, I'm just taking him as an example, were to come across, say, a religious procession, stand there, take a microphone, and insult the gods going there in that religious session, knowing that violence would erupt, then certainly that would be an insight. That would be the familiar match to a powder keg situation. Yes, there would be an offense. But if he was writing an article or making a video on processions in general, and then said that these processions should not be allowed in the public street to block traffic or put others to any discomfort, that certainly would not be an offense. Unless there is immediate violence or an incitement to violence, there would be no offense in most of these cases. And that's how the courts have read down sections, even the sedition section. For example, in the Balbir Singh case on sedition, on the day of that Indira Gandhi was shot down, two Sikh gentlemen shouting in a petrol pump in Chandigarh, Raj karega Khalsa, then Hindu Raj nahi chalegi, etc., etc., etc. Lots of stuff like that was still held to be not guilty of sedition because they did not intend to incite violence and there was no violence that ensued. So even in the US, where the definition is that freedom of speech is not freedom to shout fire in a crowded theater. It's only fighting words that tend to incite people into violence, which is made punishable.
So,
bad
Hegde,
taste or something like that is not punishable.
देश के गद्दारों को गोली मारो सालों को, is that punishable?
Now, देश के गद्दारों को गोली मारो सालों को, in the where is it said? It is if it is said on a public street where those whom you are pointing out as gaddars, and as a consequence there are people who are ready to spark violence and violence does ensue, then that would be punishable. An army colonel, say, or somebody like that, some military chappie sitting in an officers' club after 3 drinks, saying, "Oh, all these terrorists should be shot, all these traitors should be shot," does not incite violence except in his own mind. That would certainly not be punishable. Context is also very important.
So, again, there has been, and now I'm arguing on the other side, there has been arguments that Kangana Ranaut has insulted the heroes of our independence movement, the actual country, the freedoms we enjoy. She deserved to be taken to task as well. Do you agree that there was any sort of offense in what she said, or was she just someone expressing an unqualified opinion that deserves to be ignored?
Obviously. I mean, I don't learn my history from Kangana Ranaut, but she makes me laugh. And that's it. Nothing else. I don't think there was an offense. We do not have an act against bad-mouthing Mahatma Gandhi or the freedom struggle. To the best of my knowledge, the President of India in independent India has not signed such an act. So unless Parliament defines an offense like this and makes an act, right now what she said is not illegal.
It's not illegal. So, Ms. Nundy, in conclusion, and I know you have to leave, so I'll keep this brief. Both Vir Das, Kangana Ranaut have the right to express their opinions, whether in India or overseas. None of what they have said, what either of them have said, have broken any of our laws in our country. People might be offended, in which case they have the full right to also write or put out videos that contradict or disagree with what these individuals have said. But that is where the right ends. Is that correct?
I agree with everything you said, except for the last bit,
Okay.
Which is that I think that we do need to, while all of our speech offenses are, pretty much all of our speech offenses are hugely overbroad and they don't conform to the standard of mere incitement to violence. They should, but I mean, actually, I don't think they should. But they are hugely overbroad. I think that we need to look at a number of issues when it comes to free speech. What is the state doing to support sort of idiocy like Kangana Ranaut's? You know, it just gave her a Padma Shri. Then, is there a way in which the state is suppressing one kind of speech and not suppressing another kind of speech? And lastly, and I think that this is an issue that is really, really under discussed. I think we need to look at structurally at hate speech, look at take away the disproportionate criminal punishments, look at the extent to which actual harm is being caused, indiscrimination, in denial of jobs, for example, look at whether a civil penalty is required. And I think this is something we really need to, as a society, look at. And there is leadership from the Global South, the South African court. And I think it is high time that we, in our jurisdiction, went in that direction. Thank you so much for having me, Mr. Souza. You're on mute.
Sorry. I hope this clears up a lot of the questions that were asked. I want to thank both of my panelists for giving us their time. If there are more questions, do drop them into the chat window, and we'll arrange another conversation on freedom of speech, because at the end of the day, it's really the Constitution that we have to keep an eye on, and the fundamental freedoms that the Constitution gives us. It's within the fundamental freedoms that we have to work. Remember, this idea of the police picking someone up, putting them in jail, many court dates after which the person is let go, that's just using the process to create a chilling effect where people are afraid to speak, even before their day in court. That's something that we should strongly raise our voices against. Thank you all for watching. Good night.